The rain fell in sheets, blurring the city lights into a watercolor smear of neon and despair. He stood across the street from her building, the water soaking through his $1,000 coat, plastering his black hair to his scalp. He did not feel the cold. He felt nothing but the hollow ache in his chest, a cavern carved out by her absence. This was what it was to be without her. It was to be a ghost in his own life, haunting the edges of hers. Jinwoo Kwon, a man who commanded legions with a single word, who could purchase silence or death with a flick of his wrist, was undone by the memory of a woman's laugh. He watched the light in her third-floor window, a warm, defiant square against the bruised purple of the night sky, and knew he was looking at the only real thing in his world. And it was a world he could no longer enter. 3 months earlier, the world had been muted, a symphony played in shades of gray. Jinwoo sat in the plush velvet booth of Aria, the city's most exclusive restaurant, a place where whispers were traded like currency and fortunes were decided over plates of food too beautiful to eat. Opposite him, Sujin, the daughter of a shipping magnate his uncle deemed a suitable match, spoke of art auctions in Geneva. Her voice was a pleasant, melodic drone, but Jinwoo heard none of it. He was looking at her mouth move, a clinical observation of mechanics, while his mind catalogued shipping routes, security vulnerabilities at the docks, and the precise amount of pressure one needed to apply to a rival's throat to ensure compliance. He was bored. It was a profound, soul-deep boredom that had been his constant companion since he'd inherited the Seihan group from his father. Power was not a thrill. It was a weight, a cold, heavy crown he could never take off. He lifted his glass of water, the ice clinking like tiny, distant bells, and his gaze drifted. It was a careless, sweeping glance across the opulent room, expecting nothing. And then he saw her. Time did not slow down, it shattered. She moved between tables with a grace that defied the clunky utilitarian uniform she wore. She was not like the other women in the room, all sharp angles and calculated smiles. There was a warmth that radiated from her, a quiet confidence in the set of her shoulders, a life in her dark eyes that seemed to burn brighter than all the crystal chandeliers combined. She laughed at something a patron said, a low, genuine sound that cut through the restaurant's polite hum, and the sound hit Jinwoo like a physical blow. His heart, a dormant, functional muscle, gave a painful lurch. Who was she? The question was not a thought, it was an imperative, a demand his very soul made of the universe. Jinwoo? Sujin's voice broke through the spell, sharp with annoyance. Are you even listening to me? He turned his head slowly, the image of the waitress seared onto the back of his eyelids. No, he said, the honesty of it surprising even himself. Sujin's perfectly sculpted mouth fell open, but Jinwoo was already signaling for the maitre d', his eyes never leaving the woman who was now clearing a table near the window. When the maitre d' scurried over, bowing low, Jinwoo's voice was quiet but laced with an intensity that made the man flinch. Our waitress, Jinwoo said. She will be replaced. That one. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Will serve this table for the remainder of the evening. It was not a request. In Jinwoo's world, there were no requests, only commands. Lena felt a tap on her shoulder and turned from stacking plates. It was Jacques, the maitre d', looking flustered. Lena, table 7, Mr. Kwan's table. You take over. Now. Lena frowned. But that's Maria's section. Mr. Kwan requested you specifically, Jacques hissed, his eyes wide with a fear she didn't understand. Do not mess this up. Be polite. Be invisible. Be invisible. That was her specialty. Lena smoothed down her apron, her heart thumping with a vague unease. She knew who sat at table 7. Everyone knew. Jinwoo Kwon. His picture was occasionally in the business pages, a handsome, stony-faced man who had inherited a corporate empire shrouded in rumor and shadow. They said he owned the city's arteries, the docks, the trucks, the warehouses. They said he was more powerful than the mayor. She took a deep breath and approached the table. The woman with him was stunning, dripping in diamonds that caught the light, and she was glaring at Jinwoo with pure fury. Jinwoo himself was leaning back, his focus entirely, unnervingly, on Lena as she approached. It was like walking into a magnetic field. His gaze was heavy, a physical weight on her skin. He was even more striking in person, all sharp lines and dark intensity. A thin, white scar cut through his left eyebrow, a tiny flaw in an otherwise perfect, severe face. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden dryness in her throat. "My name is Lena. May I get you anything?" The woman, Sujin, scoffed. "We will be getting the check." Jinwoo did not look at his date. His eyes, dark and depthless as a winter ocean, remained fixed on Lena. "Ignore her," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the floor. "Bring us 2 glasses of your most expensive champagne." "We are leaving," Sujin snapped, standing up so abruptly her chair nearly toppled. She threw her napkin onto the table. "This is the most insulting evening of my life." She stormed off without a backward glance. An uncomfortable silence descended. Lena stood frozen, unsure of the protocol for a powerful mob boss being dumped in the middle of her section. Jinwoo watched his date disappear, his expression unreadable. Then he turned that laser-like focus back to Lena. "1 glass of champagne, then." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And your name is Lena?" He said it not like a question, but like a statement of fact he was committing to memory. Like he was tasting the syllables. "Yes, sir," she said, her professionalism a thin shield. "Don't call me sir," he corrected softly. "My name is Jinwoo." This felt dangerous, more dangerous than any angry customer or kitchen mishap. This felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and looking down into a beautiful, terrifying abyss. "I'll get that champagne for you, Jinwoo." As she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back, a burning brand of possession that made her shiver. Jacques' warning echoed in her head. Be invisible. It was already too late for that. From that moment, Jinwoo's world reoriented itself around her. He learned her schedule. He came to the restaurant every night she worked, always requesting her section, always sitting alone at table 7. He was a perfect gentleman, quiet, observant, tipping an amount that made her stomach clench with a mixture of awe and revulsion. He would watch her, his expression intense, as if he were trying to solve a complex puzzle. Lena tried to ignore him. She treated him with the same professional courtesy she gave everyone else. But it was impossible. His presence was a silent gravitational pull. The other staff whispered. They gave her a wide berth, their fear of him extending to her by proxy. One rainy Tuesday, as she was leaving after her shift, a black town car slid to a silent stop beside her at the curb. The back window lowered, revealing Jinwoo, his face illuminated by the dashboard's glow. "Get in," he said. Lena clutched her worn tote bag to her chest. "I don't think so." "It's raining, Lena. I'll take you home." "I have a bus pass," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I'm not a charity case." A flicker of something, surprise, amusement, crossed his face. "I am not offering charity. I am offering a ride." He paused. "And dinner, at a place where you don't have to work." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This man was power and money and danger, everything she had learned to be wary of. Her mother's voice was a constant echo in her mind. "Men with that much money don't see people like us, baby. They see things to own." But there was something else in his eyes, something beyond the cold authority. A loneliness that resonated with a hidden part of her own. "Why?" she asked, the question hanging in the damp air between them. "Why me?" Because when I look at you, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, the world stops being gray. The raw, unexpected poetry of it disarmed her. It was the most ridiculous, melodramatic line she had ever heard, and yet she believed him. Against all reason, she opened the car door and slid inside. The scent of rich leather and him, a clean, sharp scent like cold steel and expensive cologne, enveloped her. This was a mistake. A terrible, fascinating mistake. He took her to a tiny, nondescript Korean restaurant in a neighborhood she'd never been to. There was no maitre d', just an old woman who bowed deeply to Jinwoo and led them to a private room. The food was simple, soulful, and unlike anything she had ever tasted. He was different here. The stony mask he wore at Aria was gone. He spoke about his childhood, about learning to make kimchi from his grandmother. He asked her about her studies, her passion for botany. He listened, truly listened, with an attentiveness that was both unnerving and deeply flattering. You want to open a flower shop? He asked, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less formidable. A small one, she confessed, feeling strangely shy. Specializing in native plants, things people think of as weeds. I think they're beautiful, resilient. Like you, he said softly. Lena's fork clattered against her plate. She picked it up quickly, her cheeks flushing. Don't do that. Do what? Analyze me. Say things like that. It made her feel exposed, like a specimen under a microscope. He leaned forward, his intensity returning, but this time it wasn't threatening. It was focused. I'm not analyzing you, Lena. I'm seeing you. And that was the terrifying truth. He did see her. In a city of millions where she felt invisible, this man, this dangerous, powerful man, saw her completely. The dinners became a regular occurrence. He never pushed, never demanded. He would simply be there after her shift, his car a silent, waiting promise of warmth and conversation and a world away from her own. She learned about the weight of his family's expectations, the crushing burden of a legacy he never asked for. He spoke of his business, the Seihan Group, in vague but impressive terms: logistics, shipping, investments. She told him about her struggles with tuition, about her disapproving mother who worried incessantly, about her dream of a small patch of green in the concrete jungle. She was falling for him. It was a terrifying, exhilarating freefall. Her best friend and roommate Chloe was less than enthralled, a mysterious, ridiculously rich Korean billionaire who just happens to own half the city is suddenly obsessed with you, Chloe said one night, perched on the end of Lena's bed. You don't find that a little bit creepy? Is that even legal? It's not like that, Lena insisted, though a part of her echoed Chloe's skepticism. He's different when he's with me. He's gentle and sad. Oh, honey, the rich are always sad. It's their favorite hobby, Chloe said, her tone softening. Just be careful, Lena. Men like that, they don't just date, they acquire. Lena pushed the thought away. When she was with Jinwoo, she didn't feel acquired. She felt cherished. He would bring her small, thoughtful gifts, a rare botanical textbook, a single perfect wildflower pressed between pages of an old poetry book. He never tried to kiss her, never pushed for anything more than her time. The restraint was more seductive than any overt gesture could have been. The turning point came a month into their strange courtship. He took her to a private conservatory he owned, a massive glass dome filled with exotic plants from around the world. It was a breathtaking, secret Eden in the heart of the city. It's beautiful, she breathed, touching the velvety petal of an orchid that was the color of a twilight sky. It was my mother's, he said, his voice quiet. She loved plants. She said they were honest. They grow toward the light. or they die. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Lena, I want you. The words were simple, direct, and they landed in her heart with the force of a tidal wave. I know, she whispered. No, he said, stepping closer. He gently took her hand, his thumb tracing a line over her knuckles. His touch was electric. I don't think you do. I don't just want to take you to dinner. I want to wake up with you. I want to hear you laugh in my home. I want to give you the world, and I want to be the man who deserves to stand in it with you. Her breath hitched. This was it, the edge of the cliff. She looked up into his dark, searching eyes. I'm scared, Jinwoo. So am I, he admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice shattered her last defense. She lifted her other hand and touched the scar on his eyebrow. He flinched almost imperceptibly, then leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. In that moment, he wasn't the formidable Jinwoo Kwon, head of the Seihan group. He was just a man, lonely and afraid, reaching for the light. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a desperate, hungry meeting of two solitary worlds. It was months of unspoken tension, of longing glances across a restaurant, of rainy nights and quiet conversations, all culminating in a single explosive moment. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her tight against him as if he was afraid she might disappear. He tasted of expensive whiskey and a deep, aching loneliness that she now understood was a mirror of her own. The kiss sealed it. She was his. He was hers. They tumbled headlong into a love affair that was as intense and all-consuming as he was. Her life transformed. The exhaustion of her double shifts was replaced by mornings in his minimalist penthouse, a place of glass and steel that he was slowly allowing her to fill with plants. The apartment overlooked the entire city, a kingdom at his feet, and yet his attention was only ever on her. He showed her a side of himself no one else saw. He was tender, surprisingly domestic, and possessed a dry, self-deprecating humor that only emerged when they were alone. He helped her study for her botany exams, listening patiently as she explained the intricacies of photosynthesis. He held her when she cried on the phone with her mother, who was deeply suspicious of this sudden, wealthy man in her daughter's life. For a few blissful months, they existed in a bubble. But bubbles, by their very nature, are fragile. The first crack appeared when a man named Min-jun, Jinwoo's second-in-command, showed up at the penthouse unannounced. He was sharp-eyed and moved with the coiled stillness of a predator. He spoke to Jinwoo in rapid, hushed Korean, his gaze flicking to Lena with something that looked like pity. Jinwoo's entire demeanor shifted. The gentle man she knew vanished, replaced by the cold, authoritative figure she had first seen at the restaurant. His voice became clipped, hard. He dismissed Min-jun and turned back to her, but the mask was still in place. Business, he said, the word a steel door slamming shut between them. She didn't press, but the incident planted a seed of doubt. What was this business that could transform him so completely? The Seihan group was in logistics, he'd said, but the way Min-jun looked at him, with a deference that bordered on fear, spoke of something more. The cracks began to spread. Canceled dates with terse, one-word explanations. A tension in his shoulders that even her touch couldn't soothe. The night she found a gun in the drawer of his nightstand, cold and heavy and real. The seed of doubt began to sprout into a thorny vine of fear. She knew she had to ask. She was afraid of the answer. She chose a quiet evening. They were curled up on his massive sofa, the city lights twinkling below them like a fallen constellation. She traced the scar on his eyebrow, her heart pounding against her ribs. Jinwoo, she began, her voice barely a whisper. What do you really do? He went still. The warmth drained from his body, leaving a chilling rigidity. He sat up, moving away from her slightly, creating a chasm between them on the sofa. We've talked about this, he said, his voice flat. I run my family's company." "No," she said, finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. "I'm not a fool. I see the way people look at you. The fear. I see Minjun. I found the gun. I need you to tell me the truth, the whole truth, or this." She gestured between them, her hand trembling. "This isn't real." He stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of stone. She saw a war raging in his eyes, a battle between the world he was born into and the world he wanted to build with her. She thought he was going to lie, to shut her out again. Instead, he let out a long, shuddering breath. The sound was one of utter defeat. "My father," he began, his voice low and raspy, "did not build a logistics company, Lena. He built an empire. The Sehan Group. We own the docks, all of them. Nothing comes in or out of this city by sea without our approval. We control the unions, the transport, the storage." "That's aggressive business," she said, her throat tight. "It's more than that." He finally met her eyes, and the bleakness she saw there stole her breath. "We enforce our contracts. We eliminate competition. We move goods for people who want to avoid official channels. We are not a corporation, Lena. We are a pa, a family. In your language, you would call us a syndicate, the Mafia." The confession hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Mafia. The word was ugly, brutal. It conjured images of violence and darkness, of everything she was not. It explained the fear in Jacques' eyes, the gun in the drawer, the coldness that could descend on him in an instant. Her mind reeled, trying to reconcile the two Jinwoos, the man who gently tended to the orchid in his mother's conservatory, and the kingpin who controlled a criminal empire. How could they be the same person? "You've hurt people?" she whispered, dreading the answer. His silence was answer enough. He didn't have to. The men under him did. But the orders, the responsibility, it was all his. The crown was heavier than she could have ever imagined. "This was not the life I would have chosen," he said, his voice raw with a pain that seemed ancient. "It is my inheritance, my duty. When my father died, the crown passed to me. To refuse it would have meant a war. It would have meant the death of everyone loyal to my family, including Minjun, including me." She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. The penthouse, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. The beautiful view of the city now looked like a conquered territory. "I need to go," she said, her voice numb. He was on his feet in an instant, his face etched with panic. He reached for her but stopped himself, his hand hovering in the air between them. "Lena, please. Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," she cried, the numbness giving way to a tidal wave of betrayal and fear. "You let me fall in love with a lie." "I am not a lie," he insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "The man I am with you, that is the only real part of me. You are the only real thing in my life. Don't you see? You are my escape from all of that. You are my light." "And what am I supposed to do?" she shot back, tears blurring the city lights into streaks of pain. "Am I supposed to ignore it? Am I supposed to sit here in this beautiful apartment, bought with money from God knows what, and pretend it's okay? Pretend you're just a businessman? I can't, Jinwoo. I can't live in the dark with you." Her principles, the core of who she was, were screaming. Her mother's warnings, Chloe's fears, they weren't cynical. They were right. "I love you," he said, the words torn from his soul. It was the first time he'd said them. They were a plea, a lifeline he was throwing to her across the abyss that had just opened between them. The words only made it worse. They were a brand on her heart, searing her with the knowledge of what she was about to lose. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the tears finally falling. "I can't." She walked out of the penthouse, out of his life, and each step felt like she was tearing a part of herself away. The elevator ride down was an eternity. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she saw the devastation on his face, she knew she would break. And she had to be strong. For herself. For the simple, honest life she had to reclaim. Jinwoo stood by the window, watching her yellow taxi pull away from the curb, a tiny speck of light swallowed by the city's indifferent darkness. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, a crushing, physical presence. The plants she had brought into the sterile space seemed to mock him, vibrant and alive in a room that now felt like a mausoleum. He walked to the kitchen, to the small pot of herbs she had been tending on the windowsill. He touched a leaf of basil, and the fresh, clean scent filled the air, a ghost of her presence. A guttural roar of pure agony tore from his throat, and he swept his arm across the marble countertop, sending the pot crashing to the floor. Dirt and broken pottery scattered across the pristine white tile. It was a meaningless act of violence. It solved nothing. It didn't bring her back. The world had been gray before her. Now, it was black. Lena's old life returned, but it no longer fit. Her tiny apartment felt cramped, not cozy. The drone of the city traffic outside her window was jarring, not familiar. The fatigue from her job settled back into her bones, heavier than before. She had tasted a different kind of life, a different kind of love, and the memory of it was a constant, dull ache. "You did the right thing," Chloe told her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as Lena stared blankly at the TV. "You can't build a life on a foundation like that. It's poison." Lena knew Chloe was right. Logically, she knew it, but her heart was a traitor. It yearned for the sound of his voice, the intensity of his gaze, the surprising gentleness of his touch. She missed the man, not the monster, but the two were inseparable. Days bled into weeks. She changed her phone number. She asked Jacques to move her to a different section at the restaurant, one far from table 7. But his ghost was everywhere. Every black town car made her heart leap. Every well-dressed man with dark hair made her look twice. She was miserable. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that he was miserable too. His misery was a cold, quiet rage. Jinwoo plunged himself back into the work of the Sehun group, but the boredom was gone, replaced by a self-destructive nihilism. He became more ruthless, more decisive, more of the cold-blooded leader his uncle had always wanted him to be. He took risks, initiated hostile takeovers of rival territories, and consolidated his power with brutal efficiency. His men were terrified of him, his enemies even more so. "You have a fire in you now, nephew," his uncle, Chairman Kwan, said with grim approval during one of their weekly meetings. The chairman was a man carved from granite, with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven nothing. "This is the Jinwoo I have been waiting for. That woman, she made you weak. It is good she is gone." The words, meant as a compliment, felt like a knife twisting in Jinwoo's gut. Weak? With Lena, he had felt stronger than ever. He had felt human. This was the weakness. This hollowed-out shell, this king of a filthy, meaningless kingdom. One night, Minjun found him in his office, staring at a single wilting wildflower in a crystal vase. It was the one she had picked for him on a walk through the park, a stubborn piece of life that had pushed its way through a crack in the pavement. A weed, she had called it, resilient. Now it was dying, just like everything she had touched in his world. "This is not sustainable, Hyung," Minjun said softly, using the respectful term for an older brother. "You are burning yourself out. You are burning everything down around you." "Good," Jinwoo rasped, his eyes fixed on the drooping petals. "Let it all burn." Is this what she would want? Jinwoo's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with fury. "Do not speak her name." Minjun stood his ground. He was the only person who could. "I will, because she was the only one who ever made you look like our father's son and not his prisoner. This life, it is a prison. She gave you a key. and you are just sitting in the cell, staring at the locked door." Minjun's words struck a chord deep inside him. A prison. That's what it had always been, and Lena had been his one hope of escape. He had asked her to join him in his cell, to live in the dark with him. He had been a fool. You don't ask the light to join the darkness. You fight your way out of the darkness to stand in the light. A decision, cold and clear as ice, formed in his mind. It was impossible. It was suicidal. It would mean war with his own family, with his own history. It was the only way. The next morning, he called a meeting of the Sehan Group's board, the captains of his illicit empire. He stood before them, men twice his age with violence etched into their faces, and he laid out his plan. "The Sehan Group is going legitimate," he announced, his voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument. "All of it. We will cut ties with our off-book suppliers. We will end the enforcement contracts. We will restructure the dock unions under full compliance with labor laws. We will become the company we pretend to be, a logistics corporation, nothing more." The room erupted. Shouts of disbelief and fury filled the air. His uncle, Chairman Kwan, rose to his feet, his face purple with rage. "You are a fool," the chairman roared, slamming his hand on the polished mahogany table. "You would throw away everything your father built? Everything our family bled for? For what? For a woman? A foreigner who has poisoned your mind?" "I am throwing away the poison," Jinwoo countered, his voice dangerously calm. "I am honoring my father by ensuring his name is not just a synonym for fear. We have enough money. We have enough power. Now we will have a legacy that is not written in blood." "This is betrayal!" another captain yelled. "You cannot do this!" "I can," Jinwoo said, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting every man's eye. "I am the head of this family. My word is law. Anyone who opposes this new direction is free to leave, but you will leave with nothing. And if you try to stand against me, I will remind you why my father put me in this chair." The threat was veiled, but every person in the room understood it perfectly. It was a declaration of war. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Two of his captains defected, taking their crews with them and immediately starting a turf war at the southern docks. A shipment was hijacked. A warehouse was burned to the ground. The city was on a knife's edge. Jinwoo did not sleep. He worked tirelessly with Minjun, dismantling the criminal infrastructure piece by piece, while simultaneously fighting a covert war against the men who had once been his allies. He was forced to be more ruthless than ever before, but for the first time, it was with a purpose. He wasn't consolidating power, he was tearing it down. He used his vast fortune to buy out rivals, to pay off corrupt officials and expose them, to set up legitimate businesses for his men who wanted a way out. He bled money and manpower, but with every piece of the old empire he destroyed, he felt a weight lifting from his soul. He sent Minjun with an envelope for Lena. It contained the deed to a small storefront in a gentrifying neighborhood and a cashier's check for enough money to start her dream. There was no note, no name, just a key and the money. Lena received the anonymous gift with a tremor of shock. She knew instantly who it was from. Her first instinct was to send it back. It was his money, tainted money. But then she thought about the gesture. He wasn't trying to buy her. He was trying to give her the one thing she wanted most, with no strings attached. He was setting her dream free. She visited the storefront. It was perfect, dusty and neglected, but with a large front window that caught the morning sun. She could picture it filled with shelves of native flowers, a small counter, a corner where she could host workshops for neighborhood kids, a patch of green in the concrete jungle. Her patch of green. She kept the key. The war for the soul of the Sehan Group lasted for 6 agonizing months. Jinwoo survived 2 assassination attempts. Minjun took a bullet in the shoulder, protecting him. But they were winning. The old guard was crumbling. replaced by a new, legitimate structure. He was transforming the beast his father had created. The final confrontation was with his uncle. Jinwoo found him in the family's traditional home, a place of quiet gardens and paper screens that hid a century of secrets. "You have destroyed us," the chairman said, his voice heavy with defeat. He was an old man now, the fire in his eyes banked to embers. "No," Jinwoo replied, looking out at the perfectly manicured garden. "I have saved us." He placed a portfolio on the low table between them. "This is your retirement, an account in Switzerland, a villa in Jeju, enough to live out your days in comfort. The alternative is a federal prison. I have given the authorities enough to put you and your allies away for the rest of your lives. The choice is yours, Uncle." His uncle looked at him, a flicker of the old pride in his eyes. "He would be ashamed of you." "My father is dead," Jinwoo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have to live with myself." Chairman Kwon took the portfolio. The war was over. A month later, Jinwoo stood across the street from a small, brightly lit shop called Urban Flora. A simple, elegant sign hung above a window filled with vibrant, resilient flowers and green plants. He could see her inside, talking to a customer, her face animated with a passion that made his heart ache. She was beautiful. She was thriving. She was everything. He had done it. He had fought his way out of the darkness. Now, he had to see if she would let him stand with her in the light. He took a deep breath and crossed the street. The small bell above the door chimed as he entered. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh blossoms, the scent of life. Lena looked up from the counter, and her eyes widened. All the air left her lungs. He looked different. The haunted, weary tension was gone from his shoulders. He looked tired, yes, and there was a new, thin scar on his cheekbone. But his eyes were clear. The shadows were gone. "Jinwoo," she breathed. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his gaze drinking her in. He looked around the small shop, at the life she had built. His eyes came back to hers, and in them she saw a question. A hopeful, terrified question. Her customer left, and they were alone. The silence was thick with everything they had been through, with the pain of their separation and the desperate hope of this moment. "The news," she said finally, her voice shaky. "I've seen the news. About the Sehan group. The restructuring. The arrests." "It's done," he said simply. "It's over." "Was it for me?" she asked, the question she was almost too afraid to voice. "At first," he admitted, taking a tentative step closer, "I thought if I changed my world, I could earn the right to be in yours. But then, it became about me, about becoming a man who didn't need to hide, a man who could deserve a woman like you, a man who could grow toward the light." He was echoing her words from the conservatory all those months ago. He remembered. He had held on to them. Tears welled in her eyes. "It was a beautiful gift, Jinwoo. The shop." "It was a promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He was standing in front of her now, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "A promise that I would build a world where your dreams could grow safely." She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the new scar on his cheek. "You could have been killed." "Living without you was a slower kind of death," he whispered. He covered her hand with his touch both a question and a plea. "Lena, I know I have no right to ask. I know I destroyed what we had. But I am not that man anymore. And every day for the rest of my life, I will work to be the man you deserve. Please, give me a second chance. Let me start again." She looked into his eyes, into the soul of the man who had torn down his own corrupt kingdom for a chance at redemption, for a chance at her. The love she had tried so hard to bury, to kill, bloomed in her chest, fierce and undeniable. It had never really died. It had just been waiting for the light. She didn't need to say a word. She surged forward, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulled his mouth down to hers. The reunion kiss was nothing like their first. It was not a collision of lonely worlds, but a quiet, certain homecoming. It was gentle and deep, a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of battles won, of a future earned. It tasted of tears and rain, and the faint, hopeful scent of new blossoms. He held her as if she were the most precious thing in the universe, his hands tangled in her hair, his body shaking with the sheer relief of holding her again. This was real. This was their new beginning. 1 year later, Jinwoo stood beside Lena at the counter of Urban Flora. He was wearing an apron dusted with soil, a smudge of dirt on his nose that she reached up to wipe away with a laugh. The shop was thriving, a vibrant hub of life in the neighborhood. The Seihan Group, now a fully legitimate global logistics firm, was more profitable than ever, a testament to Jinwoo's sharp business acumen when it was finally untethered from violence. His past was not entirely gone. Minjun was still his head of security, though now he dealt with corporate espionage instead of street warfare. There were still whispers about who Jinwoo Kwon used to be, but they were just that, whispers, ghosts of a life left behind. Lena's mother had finally come around, won over by Jinwoo's quiet respect and his obvious, all-encompassing devotion to her daughter. She had even, grudgingly, admitted that his kimchi was almost as good as hers. As the last customer of the day left, Lena turned and wrapped her arms around Jinwoo's waist, resting her head against his chest. She could feel the steady, calm beat of his heart. "Happy?" she murmured. He looked down at her, his eyes filled with a peaceful, profound love that still, after all this time, took her breath away. He leaned down and kissed her softly. "When I am with you," he said, his voice a low, happy rumble, "the world is not just visible. It is in full, brilliant color." He had found his light, and together, they had built a garden in the middle of the city, a place where even the most resilient, unexpected things could grow. This story teaches us that love is not about finding a perfect person, but about inspiring each other to become the best version of ourselves. It shows that true strength isn't found in power or control over others, but in the courage to dismantle a toxic legacy and build a new one based on honesty and redemption. It is a reminder that everyone, no matter how lost in the darkness, deserves a chance to fight their way toward the light, and that love can be the most powerful catalyst for that change. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. If this story of love, sacrifice, and redemption moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel for more emotional stories, and sharing this video with someone who believes in the power of second chances. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the moment Jinwoo confessed his true identity to Lena? Was her decision to leave him the right one? And what would you have done in her place? And for our next story, we want you to choose. Should we explore the story of Minjun, the loyal second-in-command, and tell the tale of the sacrifices he made in the shadows? Or would you prefer to see the story of Lena's best friend, Chloe, as she navigates her own complicated love life while trying to protect her friend? Let us know your pick in the comments. #MinjunStory or #ChloeStory. We can't wait to see what you choose.